All right, welcome. Today, we're going to jump into a really fascinating and, maybe a little counterintuitive idea: the orderly retreat. In a world that's always screaming, go, 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 what can we actually learn from stepping back? Let's get into it. Man, this quote just hits home, right? That feeling of always being on the offensive, playing this kind of all out attack soccer with your life and your job. You just push, and when you're totally burnt out, just trying to patch things up, you tell yourself, oh, it's fine. This is a strategic retreat. But is it really? Or are we just kidding ourselves? Okay, let's really unpack that all out attack life. This first part is all about that relentless, nonstop pressure to always be moving forward, no matter what. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Just look at the contrast here. On one side, you have the cosmos, the sun, the moon, everything works in this perfect natural cycle. There's an ebb and a flow, and then there's us, humanity, often just stuck in the mud, fighting, not even sure if we're going forwards or backwards. It's like we've completely lost touch with that natural rhythm. And that's the thing, isn't it? This really nails the core issue. The unwritten rule of our world is that forward is the only way to go. Retreat, that's failure. Progress is just this one-way street with no U-turns allowed, which puts us totally out of sync with how everything else in the universe actually works. Okay, so if this constant forward march is just not sustainable, what's the alternative? Let's see how this whole idea builds towards a totally different way of thinking, a kind of philosophy for a two-act life. And at the absolute center of this philosophy is this Korean concept called Jingup. Basically, it's the moment someone turns 61, and it kicks off a whole new 60-year cycle. But, it's way more than just a birthday. It's this major turning point, a time to shift gears from that life of constant pushing forward to a life of, you guessed it, orderly retreat, getting back in tune with nature's rhythm. This breaks it down perfectly. So think of life in two stages. Act 1, before you're 61, is all about that forward motion. You're working for survival, for your family, for your community to thrive. But Act 2 is just as critical. It's about consciously, intentionally letting go and stepping back to embrace a totally different kind of purpose. But here's the warning, and it's a big one. What happens if you can't make that shift? Well, the author says if we cling to our past wins, treating them like the ultimate goal, we get stuck. This ugly party of greed starts where we just refuse to let go of power or influence, and we completely lose our way. Making that transition isn't just a nice idea, it's essential. Now, I know this all might sound a little philosophical, but what does an orderly retreat actually look like in the real world, especially under the most insane pressure you can imagine? For that, we've got to look at this absolutely incredible moment from the Korean War. Okay, so try to picture this. It's late 1950. UN forces, mostly US Marines, are deep in North Korea. All of a sudden, they are completely surrounded by a gigantic Chinese army. They're outnumbered, it's freezing cold, and annihilation seems like the only possible outcome. Their only option? Retreat. But this was not a panicked run for your life, no way. This was one of the most brilliant strategic withdrawals in all of military history. For weeks, they fought their way out of this trap, battled their way to the port of Hungnam, and then pulled off this massive evacuation by sea. And they finished on Christmas Eve. It was so unbelievable that it became known as the Miracle of Christmas. I mean, the sheer scale of what they accomplished is just staggering. First off, they rescued over 105,000 of their own troops from what looked like a complete disaster. But get this, they didn't just save themselves. In this incredible show of humanity, they also found room on their ships for 91,000 North Korean civilians who were desperate to escape. And on top of saving all those people, they also managed to get over 17,000 vehicles and tons of equipment out of there. See, this wasn't a defeat. It was a repositioning. It was the ultimate orderly retreat. Of course, a miracle like this doesn't just happen by magic. It happened because of clear-headed, courageous leaders, commanders who absolutely refused to panic and instead orchestrated this masterpiece of logistics and pure grit. So, wow, what an amazing story from history. But what on earth does that have to do with us, right now, in our world? How do we take that lesson and actually apply it? Well, the author makes a pretty bold statement here. We are all at war. Now, for most of us, it's not a war with bullets and bombs. The whole nature of conflict has changed. Today's battlefields are economic, they're digital. The fights are over trade, over who's on top with technology. The pressure is on 24/7, and the risk of being surrounded by some new disruption is very, very real. And here's the key takeaway. That old model of just endless, nonstop growth, well, it might be over. We could be heading into a time where reverse growth, things like economic downturns, or even just personally downsizing, becomes the new normal. And in that kind of world, knowing how to retreat with purpose, that's not just a nice philosophy. It's a survival skill. And that brings us to this absolutely perfect metaphor. Hard times, these moments where we're forced to retreat, are like the water getting drained out of a swimming pool. All of a sudden, you see who was actually prepared and who was just pretending. It's during the retreat that you see what people are really made of. Which leaves us with this one last really important question to think about. In your own life, your career, your community, what does an orderly retreat look like for you? Remember, it's not about giving up. It's about being smart enough to know when to pivot, when to pull back and gather your strength so you can move forward again, maybe in a totally new direction. So, what's your orderly retreat?